always covered up very effectively by.
Well, is V.K. Krishna Menon's role in this whole conflict with China and the build-up to that, like the things that happened before that. I understand he had a major role in misleading Pandit Nehru about the situation, about the relation with China and the various other factors regarding China. So this is something which I've been reading and hearing all through. Like, what are your views on that? What are your...
As the defense minister, and as a defense minister in charge of the forces which suffered a defeat in the war, well, he had his this thing cut out. He faced the flag for it. He had to resign from the post and he became a political non-entity afterwards. Regarding the policy planning, Menon was also the greatest friend, associate or closest to Nehru in ideological terms as far as the worldview was concerned. Broadly in the Congress it was a left of center, and Menon was generally regarded as a person who was closer to the leftist side. And Menon had always advocated closer relationship with China, and probably he felt that the threat from Pakistan was much more than the threat from China. This is what the literature of that time suggests. But then ultimately the final arbiter for all matters relating to foreign policy, during the foreign policy, he was a person who laid down the foreign policy. He was a person who represented India at the various global arena, and he was a person who was basically the driver behind the close relations that we had with China during at least the first half of the 1950s. So Menon was a close associate, but in the formulation of foreign policy, I think he was always a follower of Nehru and a supporter of Nehru. Yes, as a defense minister, it was his own fault, or rather, if he had found that the forces were not well equipped to take on China, it was his role to see that the difference of opinion did not progress to an armed conflict. To that extent, he was certainly, he had failed in his role at that point, and he's probably the only person who suffered also. If you look at it, after the entire war, probably Nehru's health failed. He had a rather turbulent year and a half after that till he passed away in May 1964. But then Krishna Menon was relegated totally to the backbenches of the Congress party and could not ever regain his stature afterwards.
Don't you think that you could have followed it up to the present day status was going to happen? I mean, maybe the readers could have got an insight into what the relationship is between the two Asian giants today.
So I thought that at least there should be a substantial section of the people who also may not be so well informed on the subject. Whereas what is happening on present day is a matter which we all know about, the status of relationship. Probably yes, you are right. One could have continued from 62 to 2012 and put a para on that. But this thing was generally to highlight the reasons for the war, how the difference of opinion originated, how that difference of opinion create a chasm between the two countries, and how it led to an armed conflict, and what are the results of the armed conflict. So to that extent, I thought I should wind up, or I should not go beyond the immediate players in that. So the book probably comes to a conclusion after the war, the immediate 1 year after that, and touch down the major episodes till the passing away of Pandit Nehru. It was a conscious decision to end it there.
In spite of the lessons learned or not learned in the 62 war, our policies, our strategy, where military strategy, etc., I think it is still, even today, it is Pakistan-centric. And we have hostile neighbors all around. To name a few, I mean, China of course is there. Then we had problems with Bangladesh. Okay, now it's a little better. We have problems in the Sri Lankan side. In spite of all this, our strategies and our thinkings, our reactions are more Pakistan-centric. I mean, have we learned a lesson or not? I mean, I don't know whether I should be asking you or they have kidnapped some shepherds. These sort of news we hear, and then we don't do anything about it. Like I feel we are still scared of them.
To two aspects there. I feel we learned our lessons, because if we did not suffer the debacle in 62, probably we would not have focused on the armed forces to the extent we did subsequently, which sort of found its way in our victory in 1971. So the initial 10 or 15 years, we did not think that the army merited the attention that it really deserves, which led to a rot in the forces. They were not able to upgrade their equipments and implements. So that led to the defeat on that. Regarding strategic thinking, well, I feel that we have learned our lesson. There are still episodes which get reported in a manner that sort of rattles us. But again, the point that I was trying to say is that when we say the international border, at least on the Kashmir side, there is no accepted international border between India and China. And on the Arunachal Pradesh side, whatever the McMahon line is something which China is never accepted that Simla conference, though they have always abided by whatever is drawn by McMahon in that map. They claim the area, but they have not objected to or taken any action against India occupying the territories immediately south to that. So when the question about Chinese coming to this side of the international border comes in, we actually have to look at it ourselves whether there is an international border or not. And what probably the same way that we feel, there would be a similar feeling on the Chinese side also. So the relationship between the two countries these days are governed not by the border issue but by, as General Malik himself said, that the bilateral trade. China is India's largest trading partner now outside the petroleum bloc. So, and there are lots of Indians working there. You look at the imports for a small port like Cochin, Chinese imports are by far the largest. So the trade relationship between the two countries has progressed to such an extent that border disputes has taken a backseat. This is a very positive development on that.
There is something in Indian psyche as against Chinese psyche that is responsible for most of these problems.
1850 to 1950, no country would have suffered the way China did during that period. In fact, we heard about the opium wars when countries fought for the right of selling opium in China. There were areas in the cities which were owned by or occupied by various foreign powers. The results of Japanese occupation of parts of Chinese territory during the early part of the 20th century and the sort of persecution that the Chinese population had to face during that period is well documented. So when you look at average Chinese who is coming out now, he has seen that the entire world had ganged up against him during those 100 years or so. So there is a certain amount of angst and I would not use the word hatred, but it's a lot of feeling of nationalism which is deeply inbred into them. Like we learn about our national struggle, about the struggle that Congress, Gandhiji and all led so that we could get our freedom. But see the amount of suffering that the Chinese had to undergo. So there is a lot of pent up or anxiety about the intentions of the outside world, what they see as imperialist forces. So this is one reason why they tend to react in a way which we cannot easily understand, because the country has been through so much. And even today, when that describes some of their actions, within a span of 25 years, it's a country which has gone consistently at 10% plus for the last 20 years. We have grown at somewhere around 7 and 8 and we feel so happy and proud about it. So how do you expect the average Chinese to react to it? They are also, that has found its own outpouring on the behavior and attitude of the Chinese system. We have to accept the fact that they are a global power economically and militarily. So, and appreciate. We won our national freedom in a different way.